anybody who comes in with a Rottweiler, they're fucking ready, man.
They're exhausted.
They're like, please,
Yeah.
help me. We need inspiration.
There was a discussion that I thought was interesting in the scent work seminar where the guy was like, none of the sniffing should be operant. And like, he was like, everybody I've seen go today, their dogs have been operant.
What does that mean?
Like, instead of like having instinct to go to the smell or the scent, they perform a behavior to get the treat, like pawing at it or like looking at their parents. And he's like, that can't happen. They have to be smelling that on their own. And then it kind of led me to think, like, what is operant versus classical conditioning, and how do we utilize that in our training?
Wait, okay, hold on. So he's saying that they should just, sniff harder?
Yeah, that they shouldn't perform a behavior, and that you should be classically conditioning them to find the smell, rather than teaching them a behavior. Like some people would have their dogs down when they found the alert, or paw at it. And he's like, you don't want that in your training. And then I was like, how could that bleed into like what we do? Like classical conditioning.
I'm interested though, because if he's supposedly training like bomb dogs,
yeah,
you have to train a cue.
Yeah. Yeah.
There has to be some kind of operant training there. It's not like you want them dancing on top of a explosive device.
Yeah. There's just a lot of things to unpack there.
The not teaching a cue has always baffled me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no one's given me a good reason why you shouldn't teach a cue.
But I think it's also like, I don't know. Like you can teach a cue wrong if you don't know what you're doing. Like the dogs that would find it, they would like be pawing at stuff that their scent wasn't there because they knew the pawing at something got them the reward.
Yeah.
So he was like trying to
makes sense.
Yeah, fix that. But then if they did find it and it was in an area, the dogs would paw it, and he'd be like, "No, wait until the dog like goes in for the treat."
What do you mean goes in for the treat?
Like he made us do all pairing, so we did not pair one time.
Oh, so the treat was already there.
Yeah, so he wants the dog to associate the scent from like the environment rather than the person.
Okay.
But I'm just thinking, like, how does...
Well, I think an interesting... We never officially started the podcast. Hi, guys. We didn't do an introduction. You're joining us mid-conversation.
Yeah, we're just thinking about what to talk about, you know? Yeah,
and then as we started brainstorming, it felt like maybe we should just have this be the podcast.
Yeah.
So another example of that, I think, would be, say we're working on, maybe we're free shaping eye contact.
Yeah.
And so every time the dog looks at you, you give a treat, right? What I see a lot of owners do is the dog looks at them and then they go sit and then they give the treat. And I think that is a similar concept where instead of just classically conditioning, looking at me gets you food at its simplest form. All of a sudden we're throwing in operant conditioning where we're asking you to perform something to then get something.
Like so subtle that I don't even think people realize that they're doing it or what behaviors they're creating that are operant. And even like reaching for the treats before the dog has finished with the command. They're like, I'm getting something. And then they do the behavior. Or if you've seen dogs like Sunday, for example, when I have food and she knows it, she's like spinning around, sitting, going on the floor, doing all the tricks because she wants to see, how am I going to get this food? Like, are you going to do something with me? And in scent work, like we really focused on her finding that everything on her own without needing my approval.
Yeah. That's interesting. I guess, I mean, I don't know. To me, I could see, like with Lumos though, I don't know. I would be interested to see where he would have gone with that, because if you were constantly pairing the food with the immediate scent, and then, because like Lumos's issue is he would always approach, he would find it, and then he would destroy it trying to get the food. So I'm curious how he would have addressed that. If he's saying like, because for me, the way that we talked about the last time that I addressed it was rewarding him quicker.
Yeah.
But it sounds like he wouldn't have wanted that to happen.
Yeah. And for those who don't know what we're talking about, I took a scent work seminar last weekend with my dog Sunday. Oh, hi, Yuzu. And there was a lot of information that it was very informative. And then there's a lot of stuff that I'm like, sorting in my brain. So we're talking about that.
Yeah.
Another thing that he said is like when you release your dog to go into scent onto the course or whatever, that you're not supposed to like hover by them. Like some people like naturally follow their dogs.
Yeah.
And then the dog is like, where's my treat?
Yeah. Constantly like checking in with you. You want them to be like very independent.
Yeah. So
was it all of it off leash?
Yes.
Okay.
And like we knew where the hides were, so we knew exactly where the dog was going.
Yeah.
So
that's good.
Just blind hides,
You gotta really trust the dog.
Yeah, you have to read your dog's cues, but you're not to teach them any cues.
Yeah, and it is the logic that it wastes time. Is that what his logic was too?
I think that it wastes time, and that we want to create this from like a natural standpoint where the dog is driven on their own to find it, and they're going through the prey or capture.
Oh yeah. The prey sequence essentially.
Yeah, the prey sequence, and he talked a lot about that and how it has to end with the dog eating it, or the dogs also guard it at some point.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that all makes sense to me, and I get it, but I still think there's probably I would imagine there has to be some unavoidable amount of a dog offering a behavior that gets conditioned in, because like they find the scent and then so he's saying if they started pawing at it, you don't do anything.
Yeah, you don't.
You wait
want
until
to
they stop.
Yeah, because then you're rewarding the behavior of the dog just doing something to find it, and then that in turn is operant because they are using their paw because they know like if I paw this, I get food.
Yeah, but what if when you ignore them, their behavior intensifies?
Yeah. Yeah, there was a couple of dogs in the class. Like there was what is the long-haired Malinois called?
A Lacanois?
Yeah.
Or was it a Lacanois? Did it have curly hair?
No.
Or was it just a Belgian Shepherd?
I don't know.
It might have just been a Belgian Shepherd. They have long hair.
Wild. It was absolutely wild and crazy. And she was like hyping
Tervuren.
it up.
I bet it was a Tervuren.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the dog was like going into the audience, and like he was like, I'm going to go smell the audience. And she was like, what do I do? Like, I don't know what to do. He's so excited. And he was like, well, you have to get him more excited before you do the go over the start line. And I was like,
what?
Why?
So, wait. The dog was overexcited and wouldn't focus.
Yeah, it was just like frantic trying to find it because it wanted the food so badly because she had conditioned it like with food, like pairing and stuff, that the dog wasn't trying to seek the scent. The dog was trying to find what to do to get the food. So he was like frantically running around the room, and there was like almost no search.
Okay.
He was just like
guessing.
I need to like find that. And
he wasn't using his nose.
No, he wasn't using his nose.
Okay. And that the dog was doing that because she did what to create it?
She was like hyping him up before the start line, like giving him a lot of treats and stuff. And like he was like, don't use food, have your dog be in a down position. And then it was a lot of like conflicting information too.
Yeah.
Like I use a little bit of like tension when I'm releasing Sunday. So I get that like.
Yeah, she's excited.
And he was like, don't do that. Stop throwing your dog into the ring. And I said, oh.
As you're just like, like a shot put.
Yeah. But I thought it helped.
I guess it sounds like he was just like treating every dog as an individual and just trying to give them individual tips, but probably what would work best for each of them.
Yeah, he was very smart. There was a lot of really good information, but with any information, like it's good to like be like, but why? Yeah.
Yeah. You always want to know the reasons why.
Why?
And that's where I feel like if anyone does scent work and you know why you don't want to train a cue, other than it wastes time? Someone please tell me, because no one's been able to give me a straight answer on why that would be bad.
And the course that he was teaching was very much like not for trials. And all of these women are here because they like to compete. They like trials. But there are so many things that he said that we can't do in trial. So it wasn't trial purposed. It was just scent work, like honestly teaching the sport of detection and scent work.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. What was the things that he did that you couldn't do in trials?
Pairing. You can't pair in trials.
Okay.
And then a lot of the times the judge won't allow the dog to be off leash. So it creates like a really awkward, like you have to finagle your long line because you get points off if your line touches the ground, and it's just all this stuff.
Okay.
And then there was like pairing, and then you're not supposed to, which we learned this in class, you're not supposed to say alert.
Okay.
Because that makes your dog like look at you, and if you false call, they think that they found it.
Well, don't you have to say something to indicate to the trial judges that you are saying that this is the thing?
Yeah, you have to say alert, but you're not supposed to say alert in your practice.
Okay.
So,
like
I have a whole book of notes that I took, but there was definitely things that I was like, why? And if I had been like less shy of a person, I probably would have gone up to him afterwards and like been like, why are you saying this?
Yeah. You should have.
I know.
You took the seminar. He's there to answer your questions.
I know.
Yeah, because I'm curious too.
He said I could message him on Facebook.
There you go. Do it. Make out a little list of your questions and send them to him. The pairing thing, I get that they want the satisfaction of like eating the food right when they get to the scent, but I guess my confusion is, and this may be stupid, me wondering this, but like, will the dog, when do you not pair? Like, when do you not have the food there? And will the dog still respond the same way?
You're supposed to always pair in your practice, like 100% of the time. And then in trial, obviously, you're not allowed to pair. So it's just like taking that, like, 5 or 6 runs without any food.
Yeah.
And he was like, if you've taken the Karen Pryor course, you know that it takes just as many reps to, like, turn something, classically condition something, that it takes to start it. And I was like, what? Karen Pryor?
Karen?
What
are you doing here?
Karen, are you in the room with us?
Okay. Interesting. But yeah, as like a parallel in pet dog training of like the operant conditioning versus the classical conditioning, I think that's when I see it the most, is when or even something as simple as like, we're just doing a basic follow me around drill with a puppy. Then we're walking and I'll have people like walk 6 steps, stop, guide the puppy towards you with the leash, give them a treat. Walk 6 steps, guide them with the leash, give them a treat, and just do that over and over again. And the puppy is at its basic level learning, when I'm close to you, I get food. But I see people always overcomplicate it, and then the puppy gets there and they're like, sit, and
then we're asking for
and now we're asking for like way too much, and the dog isn't getting the classical conditioning of, no, it's just come to me, get food. Come to me, get food. That's all it is.
Yeah, it's like isolating baby steps into all of your lessons in your training. Like, you have to start somewhere, and you have to like do a lot of reps for the dog to learn what you want from them. And we have to look and make sure we're making it clear. And then depending on the age too, I would think like a puppy we need to be more lenient with, and like practice something for like a week rather than saying, okay, I'm going to do 1 session of recall, and then the next session we're going to do bed, and the next session we're going to do this. It's like, I prefer to allow the puppy to get good at one thing, and then check that box, and then maybe move on to the next thing.
And it's more important that they are well-mannered and like behaviorally sound than knowing things.
Yeah. I don't care that when I had my puppy, that I don't care too much about her obedience. I cared that she didn't run away from me out of fear, or like get out of the door or something. So we worked thresholds and safety commands, and I really liked the way that I trained her. So
yeah, there's different priorities for me when puppies are young.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, these are some good ideas, Paige. The cons of over-socializing puppies. I think that could be a really good one to talk about.
That is just such a good topic, Paige.
Yeah.
Because I just dealt with that.
I have multiple clients right now that are dealing with that, where the dog is a neurotic, overstimulated mess. And they're like, but we socialized them so much when they were younger.
And people will, we're going to get, or
she's stroking out.
The people are going to kill us for this because they hate this.
Let's hear it.
Over socializing your puppy turns your puppy more neurotic and nervous, and it doesn't do what you think it's going to do.
I have never, guys, I'm going to say something bold. Okay. I have never socialized any of my dogs, and are they all very stable? Snoop is probably one of the friendliest chihuahuas you'll ever see in my life, and I never socialized him.
Yes.
Because never went out of my way to socialize him.
Bring him to a park and pass him around and let kids come up to them and let adults come up. And it's like, just imagine if you were a dog, like how terrifying it would be. Like,
right.
All these things come up to you, and then you're like, I have to accept this. There's no other, no way. And it creates a lot of uncomfortability. And there are people that will die on the hill that you should do that with a puppy the first couple of weeks you get it.
No, absolutely not. Like and I think that's why, like, I have stopped trying to reclaim the word socialize. I've given up on it. Now I just say, like, exposure. Yeah. Now I just say that because socialize is too far gone for us, I think, at this point. There's no going back. But exposure, I did a lot of that with my dogs.
Like taking him to a park, maybe or public place, and then he did not interact.
He did not interact with anything. Yeah. There were multiple times I drove to a park. We spent 10 minutes, 15 minutes hanging out in the grass, walking around, feeding him lots of treats, 50 feet away from other people and kids on a playground and whatever. And then I put him back in the car and I went home. Yeah. Like very short intervals, but lots of like new experiences and new places and new sounds and, riding in the cart at Home Depot. And, when friends come over, like having them ignore him and not even pay any attention to him and him just being around. And
such a lesson for a dog to like not be the center of attention. Because if you have that friend group that's like, where's your dog? Let him out of the crate. Yeah. And then we're always making a habit of anytime somebody comes over, the dog gets overstimulated. Like that can turn to a nervous, anxious very quickly. Or they're like, I'm not the center of attention right now. And they get angry.
Yes. And like, so in the instances with these dogs in particular, I'm thinking of that I'm working with. So with one of them that was like socialized quite a bit, the issue was that he was never taught to like self-regulate. It was like anytime he was out and about or around dogs or people, he was able to act on every single whim that he had. He saw something and he wanted to go over there, he would go over there. They let him go over there. They let people come up. So it was like there was never a moment that we withheld the interaction element of it. And so now when he sees dogs, he just like goes crazy. And then when he actually interacts with dogs, he's just completely obnoxious and out of control and doesn't have any concept of social cues or like anything like that. And then on the other, end of this, there's a Rottweiler that I just started working with today. She did a lot of socializing with him and he's an asshole. And so with a dog like that, what we talked about is I was like, yes, it is important to socialize and expose power breeds and Rottweilers and things like that to people and, all that kind of stuff. But the problem is just exposing them and socializing them and having them interact does not account for when they hit adolescence, which is where he's at right now, the lack of rules that are also in place on how they're supposed to interact with people. Because now you have a dog who is body slamming and jumping up and biting people and doing all this nonsense. And you accomplished confidence, that's for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
But the issue is that now you have a very dominant dog who thinks that he can interact with people however he feels like it.
Yeah. And like they hadn't been given feedback by their owner, so sometimes it's like a free for all. And then when we start to add like rules into that exchange, like I even saw like the end of your lesson, that dog looked way better than the start of the lesson.
Yeah.
In just one lesson, because you started to like really define what the heel position looked like. And that lady was like all for it. Like she was doing such a good job with that dog.
Yeah. She was ready.
Yeah.
Anybody who comes in with a Rottweiler, they're fucking ready, man.
They're exhausted.
They're like, please, help me.
And then you see the new lesson or board and train on, and then door opens, the Rottweiler comes flying through, and then at the end of the leash is the person. You're like, okay.
Yeah, you're like, okay. First of all, let's all take a deep breath. You're in a safe place now. It's all going to get better after this. But yeah, I mean, he got a rude awakening today because he was a brat. He was a brat, and he's teetering on that age and the behaviors where he was headed down a very dangerous path. And today we knocked him right onto the straight and narrow.
It takes,
for sure.
like, you have to humble a dog a little bit too.
He needed that.
Yeah.
He needed that for sure.
Not every dog, but like
a Rottweiler,
Rottweilers need humble.
They do. But yeah, I mean, he needed to learn that there is actually, we are capable of giving you feedback on your behavior, and we're not just some dummy holding the end of the leash that you can drag around wherever you want, and then you can bite the leash, and it doesn't all have to be super confrontational. Like with him, his leash biting issue, it literally became a matter of, you want to bite the leash? I just dropped it. And the first couple of times I did that, he like shook it for a couple seconds. Nothing was happening. And then he looked at me like this. And then I reached down and I picked it back up. He grabbed it. I just dropped it. And so I wasn't even correcting him. I wasn't using positive punishment. I was using negative punishment because the fun for him was that tension of tugging on the leash and fighting with me. And I'm not fighting with you, dude.
Yeah.
Like the game is over. And literally did that for 3-4 times. And then he just stopped.
Yeah.
And he didn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And then with, at one point, we're walking around and my hand was down at my side, and he started nibbling, at my hand and trying to mouth me and stuff like that. And I just kneed him in the shoulder and pushed him out of the way. And I told the owner, I said, when a dog like this starts biting and being bratty and stuff like towards your hands, and he's not a puppy, okay? So this isn't like I'm dealing with like a 5-month-old puppy. Like he's like almost a year old, right? So he's adolescent.
He's huge.
And he's figuring out, what can I do towards humans? And putting your teeth on humans, not acceptable, right? In any capacity. So he starts doing that. I need him, right? And then I kept my hand down there, and I told her, I was like, we never, ever, ever are going to move our hand away when he starts doing that. I said, for 2 reasons. One, then it becomes more of a game because I move my hand away, and then he wants to jump up and grab it even more because I'm taking away what he wants. And then the other reason, true. I'm not moving for you.
Yeah.
You need to stop your behavior, and you need to yield to my hand, not the other way around.
It's like even those tiny little details, like allowing a dog to like with Max, like between reps of him like trying to attack us when we were trying to get the muzzle on, then he'd like be submissive and lean into us. I want pet. And then people could say, oh my God, like he loves me now. Submissive. You're being submissive if you feed into that.
Yes.
And the dog is like, sweet.
Yeah. Yeah. Rotties are like the masters of using physical pressure in space to gain that little bit of traction to build up to them doing more nefarious things.
Yes.
Because they come up to you and they push on you and they do all of this and they nibble at your hand or they like nudge your hand because they want pets or things. And every single time you yield to that and you give to that. And again, anyone who's really worked with these dogs extensively, I think would agree with us. The people that are going to be like, oh, that's just bogus, you know, blah, blah, blah. No, it's not.
Yeah.
Not when you've worked with as many Rottweilers. Like, that is so intentional for them. They're doing it very intentionally to see if they can physically impose on your space and you will yield to it.
Yeah. And they like it, you know. They like having their way, pushing things around. So I think that's a really interesting point.
But yeah, so he learned physical space. It's very important.
Yes.
Very, very important.
It starts with the little details too, as you're like building up everything. And even when I was working with Max, I was working with the owner of the company, David, or Mark, I should say, not Michael, as people call him. Michael. Somebody's like, is Michael there? And I was like,
people always call him Michael. I just say yes now.
Who's Michael? And they're like, the owner, Michael. So when Michael and I were doing Max's stuff, he was like, look at all these little areas that you're allowing him to like get leverage. Like he was busting through the door before me. And I was like trying my best, like keep him back. But he is 160 pounds.
Yes.
So it was quite difficult. And then now like we approach a doorway and he's like, ma'am.
It's all the little things. It's all the little things.
And I have so much more respect like from him, that he looks at me and he's like, I'm going to do what this lady says I'm going to do. Like we did the treadmill session, absolute mess the first time. He was like almost making the treadmill like fall over. And he was like, this is terrifying. And I was like, I have to work you through this because you can't have a temper tantrum and then realize you get out of something.
Yep.
So his owner also wanted him to learn treadmill. So we worked it and worked it and worked it. And we got on today and he was like, sweet, I like this now. Go for a little run.
We love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those moments are very important for them.
I think like when a dog is physically stronger than you, it can be quite intimidating to put and lay down some of those things. So you just have to find a way to do it in a safe manner.
Yeah.
That, you know, you can do and have the dog expect a certain routine every time.
Yeah.
We just posted a video on like muzzling a dog like him up and how that routine looks every time.
Yeah. And that's where training tools level the playing field a little bit. They equalize it. Like, I think we said this before, how I feel like people that are anti-training tools, I don't know, guys, it seems a little ableist to me because like you're assuming that everybody is going to have the physicality to be able to control a dog without training tools.
Yeah. Like
there's so many dogs in the world that if you want them to stay with their owners and in those homes, like even this Rottweiler that just started today, like this woman is tiny. Okay. And she has joint issues and there's like many different problems that she's having physically that all account for, you know, making it more difficult for her to be able to control this dog. She doesn't deserve to own that dog any less than anybody else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Especially because she wants to be able to do for him what he needs to have done to be successful. Yeah. She's driven. She's very active. She loves going for, like, she has all of the components of being able to own a Rottweiler. The problem is that we need to have something that is able to give her a little bit more physical leverage as we're working with him. So you're not going to convince me that I shouldn't put a prong collar on that dog or I shouldn't put an e-collar when it exponentially improves his quality of life, allows him to stay in the home he's currently in and not have to be either rehomed or euthanized at some point because she can't control him.
Yeah. And that's why we don't see a lot of videos of Roddy's doing positive only reinforcement.
You know, that's a good point. I don't know that I've ever seen any of those.
What we talked about, what's funny is we talked about Dr. Carey a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And she posted this thing or the AI account behind it.
It's gotta be rage bait. Yeah. Honestly.
It is rage bait. It was like things I won't accept from dog trainers anymore. And it's like asking for my credentials. I don't have to show you my credentials.
Well,
like,
we don't have to show you our credentials either, Dr. Carey.
And she's like, I don't have to show you my work because you have to pay for my work. Sketchy.
How weird.
That's weird.
Yeah. Right? That is so weird. Like how... I don't get it.
I just...
The proof is in the pudding, and you have no pudding, Dr. Carey. Yeah. Where is it? Yeah. We don't see it anywhere.
The pudding is not in the room with us.
It is not. It is not. Another one was recovering from traumatic experiences. That was another one Paige brought up. For dogs.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to go into my life story there for a second.
We're just going to trauma dump on you guys really quick. Collectively, we've got a lot.
Yes.
So
like we do the candy salad trauma dump. And then people are like, I didn't want to know you like that.
Right. Hi, my name is Michelle.
I brought the gummy worms because this horrible thing happened to me when I was a child.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Maybe we should do that for fun one day.
I really want to do that.
We should do that.
Would you guys like to hear about our trauma?
Would you guys like to hear about our collective human traumas?
Yeah.
I think that, maybe that could be our get to know us better episode.
Yeah. Get to know your trainers better.
Dogs' traumatic experiences. I'm trying to think if I have any personal examples.
When clients come here and during their drop-offs or their first lessons, they talk about how their dog is a certain way because of traumatic experience.
Yeah.
Working through stuff to where they have that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A big one I think we see is like a dog that like was attacked by a dog one day and then all of a sudden they just didn't like dogs anymore. That's when they became reactive or whatever.
It's likely, like we hear that story a lot, and it's likely that the human kept them away from other dogs for an extended amount of time after that attack.
Who was traumatized more?
Yeah.
You or the dog?
And then the dog was like, why are you being weird about this? And then collectively we're communicating like our tension on the leash or us avoiding situations as the dog being like, these situations are scary and I have to avoid them, or I have to do something about them and I have to fight, and then it's not getting corrected. So.
Yeah. And I think a piece of it too is like, so using the dog attack example, your dog gets attacked by a dog and then now you're hesitant to allow them to socialize with any other dogs, and now their last interaction of being with a dog was negative. And traumatizing. And so the longer that you keep them away from other dogs, the more that experience kind of holds more and more power.
Yeah.
And really, when you look at it, like if they have a negative experience with another dog, the only way to counteract that is to give them a lot more positive experiences with being with other dogs.
Yeah. And like right off the bat, like dog attacks are awful and very traumatic, but like if a dog's like, if we're doing a social here and a dog's get into a squabble, our first response isn't to like shut the social down and make sure like the dogs like separate and they never see each other again. Those two are never allowed to play again. We'll handle the squabble, make sure everybody's safe, obviously, and then run the social for a couple more minutes until it evens out.
Yep.
But if we're like grabbing dogs' collars and these two can't, talk it out. It leaves the last taste in their mouth is like, I'm out for blood.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said too. There's a lot of like negative experiences or traumatic experiences a dog could have that if you literally just like continue on and pretend like it never happened, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Like there's so much to be said for just not acknowledge. Obviously, as long as everyone's safe and everything's fine and no one's injured or anything like that, just like pretending like it's not happening.
Yeah.
Like I remember when Cash was a puppy, he was walking, we were at a pet store. He was probably like 6 months old, maybe at the time. And this pet store had one of those scales that like hangs from the ceiling, like those big metal ones that you weigh like bulk stuff on. And we're walking and he saw it for whatever reason. He was always a very confident dog, but for whatever reason that really freaked him out and he like pancaked on the floor. And I just dragged him and made him keep going. I didn't stop. I didn't grab treats and try to like lure him out. I didn't baby talk him. I literally just dragged him and made him keep going. And then we walked up and down that aisle 5-6 more times until he didn't care anymore. And that was it.
Yeah.
I didn't use food. I didn't make it a big deal. I didn't like, oh my gosh, I wonder if something terrible happened to him or whatever. It was just like, that's weird. Let's just keep walking by it until you figure out it's not as scary as you think it is. And so, or another one I think is like a puppy like spooks themselves by maybe they're like running around the house and they slip and they hit a wall.
Superstition.
Yes. And then they like yelp and they make a big deal. How you respond in that moment is 100% going to impact how they then internalize that and feel about it. If you freak out and you run over and you're like, oh my gosh, the puppy, something happened, and you pick them up and you make it this big deal, then they're absolutely going to be like, that was the most traumatic thing I've ever went through, even if they're totally fine.
Yeah. It's like when kids, like, have you seen those videos where they like pretend to hit their head like the adult does, and they're like, oh, are you okay?
And then the kid's
baby's
like it's ridiculous, but it just shows like how influenced they are on like how we react to things. The dogs are very similar, so I always assume the dog is fine until I'm proven otherwise. So stay as calm as you can, very calmly walk over to them, inspect them, make sure everything's good, give them a little once over, and then just continue on. And then if you find that the dog is like superstitious of that corner or maybe that area of the house, make them eat dinner over there for a week. They'll get over it. Put the bowl of food over there so they have to walk over there and they have to eat it. They'll eventually get hungry enough that they'll go over there and eat.
Yeah, I think like a lot of it's in people's heads, and we kind of over baby or infantilize our dogs, and like in turn that makes them more nervous. Another point that in the seminars, my friend was with me, and she has a Beauceron puppy, and she was like, I hear Beauceron puppies, or the guy was like, Beauceron puppies have really bad fear periods, like really intense. And I was like, is that true? And then my friend was like, I just ignore all her fear periods and like pretend they're not happening. And the dog is very confident, like very, like she's raising it beautifully, doing everything right. And like, such a good point. Just ignore her fear period and don't give into it.
Yeah. It's just like, everything's
don't
fine.
Avoid things like if the dog is suddenly scared because a broom falls in the kitchen and they're terrified to go in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Work them through that.
Yeah. Or like Snoop at one point, he got hit with a soccer ball when he was younger. And then he had like a strong avoidance with soccer balls. And to a certain extent, like, I'm fine with that. Like, yes, get out of the way of a soccer ball if it's flying towards you. That's probably a good lesson to learn as a Chihuahua. But I don't want him to be terrified of them. I want him to have a healthy respect, So what I did was I took like a kickball, which is essentially, it looks the same as a soccer ball, and I deflated it a little bit so it had like a little thing. And I literally made him eat dinner out of a kickball for like a week. And he was initially like, did not want to go anywhere near it. And then all of a sudden he was like, I'm starving. I need to go eat out of those things. And so then he got over it and then he was fine. So I think step one to working through a traumatic experience is separating your own trauma from the dog's actual trauma. And then being like, it's a dog. They're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. And we're going to work through this. And it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. Like, I have, you saw like Sport got hit by a softball very similarly. And then like, as I was leashing him up the other day, he's like, nothing's happening. The leash moves like half an inch and he's like, and like falls to the ground. And at the time you're like, what's going on here? And I was like, that's just what he does. Like, I've tried to work through this with this dog so many times.
I remember you asking me about it when it initially happened.
And I did everything that we talked about, like positive reinforcement. We went to the park. But there's something about, like, it's not even the softball anymore. It's the leash tension. If he's falling behind and there's leash tension, he's, like, crawling on the ground. Like, he doesn't know what to do with tension around his neck.
Yeah.
So I was like, should I do a harness? Same thing with the harness. Anytime he felt pressure around his body, he would, like, sink down. So I think it just has to do that he's mentally unstable of a dog. And we still walk. We still make him do it. I'm not going to, like, take away walks because once or twice during the walk, he flinches.
And I think that's an interesting point because even in that moment, I think we talked about, we were like, this is such a, not common, but this is a really good example of not everything needs to be like perfect and fixed.
No, that's a very good point. Yeah,
Like, okay, Spork's weird.
Spork's weird.
And like, he has a great life, but he has some weird things. And could you harp on his need to like walk beautifully on a leash and not have those weird moments he has, when I would say like overall he does fine on a leash. He just has those weird moments where like he reverts back to like whatever it is.
Flashbacks come back to him. He's suddenly in Nam.
You're right. Right. But like, you could look at that and you could harp on that and you could lose sleep over it and you could be like, oh, it's so sad and traumatic and blah, blah, blah. Or you could just be like, well, I guess this is just like what he does now.
Yeah.
And you've tried, you know.
It really bothered me at one point in my life, like not being able to fix every behavior. But then I have to recognize like him as a dog. It's just like, that's who he is.
Where's some leeway?
Yeah.
Where's some leeway for the dog to be the dog that they are and the personality and us be like, that is just what it is. Like Lumos is a big pacer, likes to pace. And what's crazy is that when it used to bother me so much and I would tell him to lay down and I'd tell him to go to his bed and I do all these things, it never got better. You know what made it get better? When I just stopped caring. When I stopped caring and I stopped making it a big deal and I stopped really getting on him about it, now he really hardly ever paces. You know?
When you make a big deal out of things, like, they happen.
Yeah. So that's his thing is like, you have to give some leeway for the dog to be like the dog that they are to a certain degree. Yeah. Dogs that whine. Yeah. Some dogs are just whiny. And you may not be able to fix it. And that's okay.
Especially the short hairs, very whiny.
German Shepherds, like they can just be whiny. It is what it is.
We don't have to fix everything about a dog. Like what's actually like a safety issue? What do you need from the dog? And then beyond that, can we like let other things go?
Yep, exactly. But yeah, my number one advice to helping your dog move past a traumatic experience is to just like stop making it such a big deal.
And stop feeling like so sorry for your dog and yourself.
Yeah.
Because it can be, in our efforts to fix our dog or help our dog, we can actually be very selfish. And like accidentally be like, this is more about me than it is the dog. And then you just have to accept what is.
And I think too, like, okay, so say your dog gets charged by a dog off leash when you're on a walk. And it's a traumatic experience for him. And then the next walk you go on, suddenly your dog gets a little reactive when they see a dog. And in your head, you go, oh, that's because they're scared. They had that really traumatic experience. Poor guy, whatever. And you let them do it. Slippery slope right there. You have to, if there is a like, fallout or some kind of like you're seeing new behaviors pop up that are inappropriate or unpleasant in occurrence with like a traumatic experience that they had, you have to address those without that emotional guilt of like, but they're doing it because they're scared and they were traumatized. I don't care. We're not going to get charged by a dog every time we go on a walk, and you can't act like that. So you have to really still put those things, you have to stick with your structure and your rules and hold the dog accountable for stuff regardless of why you think they're doing it.
Yeah. I've had like with my very reactive Chihuahua, Nelson, that I've talked about several times, there have been 2 incidences where he slipped out of his harness and it was his fault, but he ran over to other dogs and like it did not end well for him because he's tiny. And both of those times I was like, okay, he's learned his lesson. Like, this is great. Like, he'll never do it again. And I was more traumatized than him. And like the second day after he got flung up into the air, he went back and was like, I'm back on my bullshit. Like, I need to fuck this dog up. So there are some dogs that can take, like, they're very confident in that. But like what you do matters. And what your behavior matters.
Absolutely. So that's important too, how they react to it long term has a lot more to do with you and what you do with them versus what the experience was and everything like that. Right, Uzu?
Yeah, Uzu. And then our last little topic that I wanted to touch on here is Paige mentioned getting dogs off behavioral medication. So really quick, we'll just dive into that. In the past, I would say 2 months, we've had dogs come to our training program that literally could not be at the vet without being fully sedated under like anesthesia for basic vaccines, nail trimming, things like that. The owners are traumatized about how the vet experience goes. The vet is like very firm with them or saying, you should do this, you should do that. And so we go to a couple of vets around us locally, and we'll attend appointments with our clients. And both times with dogs that needed fully sedated, there was no sedation, no medication, no gabapentin, no trazodone, and the dogs did absolutely beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep. Extremely important. That was like, where is he? Ranger. That email that she sent me.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I can probably pull it up. So, yeah, here it is. I have a client with a cattle dog, and she had reached out to me. We'd already finished training. Dog was doing great, had been doing great, but then he had to do a vet visit. And the vet he was going to, and Ranger was wearing a muzzle. Like, she came in very prepared, knowing that he's, stranger danger and doesn't like people touching him. And the vet came in, basically, literally didn't even touch him. Mm-hmm. Didn't even touch him. Ranger didn't have any negative reaction initially at all. Because he's not going to, unless you touch him, you know what I mean? Or things like that. And even then, you'll soon find out that he's fine with that as well. But anyways, the point here is that the vet didn't even attempt to do anything before they recommended he had to be fully sedated and this and that. I'm like, you literally just laid eyes on this dog, and that is your recommendation to put his body through that of full sedation. So then she reaches out to me. I have him come in for a day of daycare so that I can simulate handling drills, have a bunch of our staff touch him as well who've never met him before. He does great, no issues. So she picks him up, we schedule a session. And this is, again, a testament to like the follow through that we give our clients. Like, I'm not calling her being like, you need to pay us $500 to do all these things.
I need more money.
No, you tell me that you have an issue that is something that we told you originally is going to be addressed in the training, and we're going to follow through on that and hold to our word, and we're going to figure it out with you. So we did that. We set up a session. We go over in the session exactly how I want her to do the vet visit. We even went into our tiny little cramped, small closet-sized bathroom, pretended it was like the vet room, had, again, a completely different staff member come in, pretend to be the vet. We went through the whole thing, right? She goes to a vet that I recommend her to, that I know is going to be a little bit more helpful with this. And then she sends me this email, and she says, "Hey, Michelle, I took Ranger to the vet. The visit was a success. There was one point where the tech was going to do a restraint for the doctor, and I knew it wasn't going to go well. They went to hold him tight. He did freak out. I told him no, and I corrected him, and I said, hey, can we do something where we're not doing like the full restraints, essentially?" So key point that I love about this, okay? She goes into this. She sees that the direction that they're going is not going to be what we discussed in training that we knew was going to work for him. She still corrected him, you know what I mean, and held him accountable for his behavior, but then said she advocated for him and said, hey, that's not going to work, but I know it is going to work. Let's do it this way. And again, this vet, being as good as they are, was like, okay, we will do it that way. She said the doctor walked him over to her. She did his full exam. He tolerated it well. He even got all of his vaccines, looked at everything she needed to. She said this was so much more than we ever got accomplished in any of our other vets. Amazing. Yeah. You know what got to that point? Good training.
Yeah.
Good training. A vet who is actually a vet trying to help dogs and their owners be able to accomplish things and work through stuff at the vet rather than just either pump the dogs full of medication to make their lives easier, the vet's life easier, or just rush through a visit by doing heavy restraint because they don't want to take the time to work on it with the dog. And then first and foremost, a client who actually advocates for their dog. Do not let yourself get intimidated when you go to the vet. It's easy to get intimidated and be like, I'm the one who doesn't know what I'm talking about. It's fine. Guess who knows?
You know your own dog.
You know your own dog. And especially if you've gone through really quality, good training, you know your dog and you know what's going to work best for them and what isn't going to work best. And if your vet is worth their weight, they will respect that and they will want your input on what is going to make this go as smooth as possible.
Yeah. So it's like do some vet shopping. If you are talking to a vet and they look at the e-collar and they're immediately like, that's cruel. New vet. That's so ignorant. And if you're one of those vets, shame on you.
Shame on you. Tell me where your experience is in advocating and recommending training techniques and methods for dogs that you see once a year.
Yeah.
For 5 minutes in the most stressful situation of their lives. Absolutely ridiculous. I'd like to end our conversation on, did you see the new Zach George drama?
No.
I just thought of it. So Zach George released an article and a bunch of posts basically claiming that there is a scientific correlation between balance trainers and domestic violence. Just take a moment to let that process and sit in and be offended.
What?
Yes. He literally said that, guys. He literally said that. He said
How
that
dare you?
I know. If you use balance training techniques, that you are more likely to perpetrate domestic violence. Can you believe that? This man is I think he's pointing the finger at himself. Yeah. I can't imagine that he's not a narcissist.
No.
He has to be.
With those piercing blue eyes, you want to avoid.
They're dead behind them. There's nothing there.
Imagine being a survivor.
Oh, he's getting ripped apart.
And
like there's so many women that are balance trainers that are coming forward being like, how fucking dare you? Like, I was a victim of domestic violence and I am a balance trainer and I can't even... Thankfully, I've never had to experience something like that in my life, but I could not imagine having had experienced something like that and then seeing someone make such an ignorant ass statement is that.
It's crazy.
Like, that is wild to me.
That's like, we have to stop supporting people like this.
Yes. The audacity of it. Absolutely insane. On a lighter note, people were making parody accounts or like posts about it. Let me read a couple because they're really funny. The credit goes to Black Kraken K9. He was making a lot of these and here it is. Yeah, Zach George's original post was, the link between forceful dog training and domestic violence is stronger than you think. Okay. And then this Black Kraken guy, he made a post that said, did you know forceful dog trainers are 83% more likely to dip their hot dog straight into a jar of mayo? When forceful dog trainers use a dustpan, they never clean up that little line of dirt that it leaves behind.
Those are good.
91% of forceful dog trainers put the empty milk jug back in the fridge. 73% of them don't even look around first. That one might be my favorite. The link between forceful dog training and summoning the undead is stronger than you think.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Just What is going on?
It's insane. When I saw that, I was like, I thought it couldn't get any worse than this.
You know, like he really thought he did something.
He really thought he did something there.
This is going to hit the press, the papers, this talk of the town. And finally, those balance trainers are going to be, you know.
We're going to be so ashamed. Yeah. We're all going to be found out as domestic violence abusers.
Yep.
Yikes. Anyway.
Thanks for joining.
On that note. Thanks for joining us today, guys. What should we have them talk about in the comments this time?
You know,
any traumatic experiences your dog has experienced and what you did to work through it.
Yeah.
That's a good one. We'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.